ज्ञान कोर्स में एक बार फिर आपका स्वागत है। आज हम दूसरे दिन में हैं और हम आज 3 लोगों को सुनेंगे। सबसे पहले हम प्रोफेसर अलेसांद्रा और मरीना जी को सुनेंगे और ये एक परिचर्चा वाला सत्र रहेगा, क्योंकि एक पोएट्री के माध्यम से ये अपनी बात कहेंगी। पोएट्री ट्रांसलेशन, ए वे टू अंडरस्टैंडिंग बिटवीन कल्चर्स। कविता के अनुवाद के वक्त कैसे सांस्कृतिक चुनौतियां आती हैं और कैसे उनको हम समझते और सुलझाते हैं। इसके बाद हम चाय के बाद डॉक्टर सोनू सैनी को रूसी हिंदी अनुवाद की चुनौतियों के संदर्भ में सुनेंगे। तो सबसे पहले मैं आप दोनों का स्वागत करता हूं आज के इस सत्र में, और अब आप माइक आपके हवाले करता हूं, आप अपनी बात शुरू करें। बहुत धन्यवाद।
ठीक है, शुक्रिया। नमस्कार। I'm going to speak in English, but we will read some poetry in Hindi as well, and I will ask some of you to read things from the presentation afterwards. So this will be interactive. I would also like to talk to you and to hear your thoughts. What we're going to do in my part of this lecture is, after the very interesting introduction we got from Alessandra yesterday, we're going to jump right into translation of poetry in this case, and just like into the kitchen. And I will share with you some of my experiences in poetry translation from Hindi into Hebrew, the language of the country I'm from. Not my language, by the way. My mother tongues are Russian and German. And from Hebrew into Hindi. And the question that I would like to ask is whether translation of poetry can be helpful in intercultural communication. And I would love to hear your thoughts about it, about the poems I will share and about the cultural meaning that they carry. The first poem that I would like to share is just the poem that started me off in this project, which was a poem by Vinod Kumar Shukla, which this is the only one in Hindi which I'm going to recite myself. हताशा से एक व्यक्ति बैठ गया था, व्यक्ति को मैं नहीं जानता था, हताशा को जानता था, इसलिए मैं उस व्यक्ति के पास गया, मैंने हाथ बढ़ाया, मेरा हाथ पकड़कर वो खड़ा हुआ, मुझे वो नहीं जानता था, मेरे हाथ बढ़ाने को जानता था, हम दोनों साथ चले, दोनों एक दूसरे को नहीं जानते थे, साथ चलने को जानते थे. I used to read this poem in my Hindi classes for purely grammatical reasons. But then we talked, of course, with the students about the meaning of the poem. And what struck me as very interesting was that this poem, the cultural meaning of this poem is actually universal. One does not need to belong to a country, to a nation, to a gender, to a religion to understand its meaning. So I decided to try and translate it into Hebrew, and this is how our poetry project was born. Now, poetry, despite being the most constrained literary genre, it is also one that conveys the most meaning with the fewest words. If you consider a short story, something written in prose, very often you could remove a lot of words and you would still retain the meaning of the short story. So here's an example. This is something I asked ChatGPT to do for me this morning. You can see one example from a short story and then the shortened version. Would someone like to read that? Okay, I'll read that. Ramu trudged home under the scorching midday sun, his bare feet raising small clouds of dust on the parched village road. His shirt, worn thin with age, clung to his back, damp with sweat. The sound of temple bells echoed from a distance, mixing with the chatter of women drawing water from a well. As he neared his hut, he saw his mother waiting at the doorstep, shielding her eyes from the sun, her face lined with worry. sounds beautiful, but still not every word is laden with meaning. You can shorten that and still understand what is happening. Rama walked home in the midday heat, dust rising under his bare feet. You still see that he's exhausted. You still see that it's hot, right? Now, the challenge in poetry translation is exactly that if you look at a poem, like Vinod Kumar Shukla's poem, it's very short. One could think you really need, I don't know, 10 minutes to translate that, right? Not many words, but every word has more than one meaning. Every word has been chosen for a particular reason, and that is the challenge in translating poetry. Another thing I wanted to say is that poetry, of course, is bound not only by this, but also by constraints of form, rhythm, meter, and in many languages also by rhyme. And yet, within these limitations, it achieves an unparalleled depth of expression. So, what I would like to show you, first of all, this is a poem by Kumar Narayan. It's called Padiyatri, and this is not a poem I've translated. I have tried it, I have thought about it, I have talked with people who have tried to translate it and also failed, and I would like you to read it and to think about the reasons. Why is it so complicated to translate? But I would really love it if some of the students would read out the poem. Could someone do that?
Yeah.
Read out the poem.
पदयात्री कहाँ हुआ ये? और ऊपर पदयात्री
और
ऊपर हाँ पदयात्री आगे बढ़ने की हड़बड़ी में कहीं पीछे तो नहीं छूट गई वे सुरम्य जगह जहाँ हम पहुंचना चाहते थे। जहाँ है वहां से भी दिखाई देता है वही सब उतनी ही दूर। बर्फ से ढके पहाड़ों की ऊंचाइयां, जगमगाती भव्यताएं, चोटियां, अपनी ही परिक्रमा करती यात्राएं, निकट की सुंदरताओं को लीदती चली जाती अंधी रफ्तारें, जबकि ऊंचाइयों तक पहुंचने के लिए छायादार बुलंदियां भी हैं और हम एक छोटी सी सैर पर निकले पदयात्रा।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। Some thoughts. I'm asking, if you had to translate this into English, where would be the problems? I can tell you that my problem with this poem starts with the title, Padiyatri. How would you translate that? I mean, of course, Padiyatri is a pedestrian, right? That's interesting, right? Because yatra is a word, on the one hand, just a journey from A to B. Very simple word. On the other hand, it has this religious meaning, the mystic meaning. The last line in the first column, apni hi parikrama karti yatraएं. How on earth would you translate that? If you think about it later, if you have any ideas, I would be happy to hear about them. So this was just one example why we failed. Me and another person who tried to translate this, we decided we are not able to do this, at least to translate it and give it justice. Now here is a poem we did translate. I translated into Hebrew with my students. Ghar Pahunchna is one of my favorites by Kumar Narayan. Could you please read that as well in Hindi? जी, इसको पढ़ दीजिए।
घर पहुंचना हम सब
एक सीधी ट्रेन पकड़कर अपने अपने घर पहुंचना चाहते हैं। हम सब ट्रेनें बदलने की झंझटों से बचना चाहते हैं। हम सब चाहते हैं एक चरम यात्रा और एक परम धाम। हम सोच लेते हैं कि यात्राएं दुखद हैं और घर उनसे मुक्त भी। सच्चाई यूं भी हो सकती है कि यात्रा एक अवसर हो और घर एक संभावना। ट्रेनें बदलना विचार बदलने की तरह हो और हम जब जहां जिनके बीच हो वही हो घर पहुंचे।
बहुत धन्यवाद. Isn't it wonderful? So on the one hand, you have two layers in this poem, right? On the one hand, it's something everyone knows. We take trains every day. We really understand what it means. Again, you don't have to be Indian to understand this. On the other hand, Kumar Narayan ji really liked the word yatra. है ना? If you think
वसुधैव कुटुंबकम जैसी भावना है, पूरी दुनिया ही मेरी अपनी है, जिनके साथ हैं वही मेरा।
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल. And like this can be seen as a poem about one little journey, but also as a whole life, right? From beginning to end. I really liked it, and here what I wanted to show that the biggest challenge for me here was to translate the words that are highlighted. Charam, param, param dham. Dham in itself is a very complicated word to translate, but charam and param, because of the alliteration, I was looking for something similar in Hebrew. And you can, even though you cannot read this, but you can see these words, they have some similar features, right? So this one is Ilion and this one is Ilai. So I was really happy with that we found this solution at least. This is one of not many translations into Hebrew that we have completed and we think that it's done, it's ready. And then it was suggested to us that we try to translate from Hebrew into Hindi. And since Hebrew is not my language, I didn't really know poetry in Hebrew, so I asked friends and colleagues to share some of their favorite poems. And I asked for them to be short because, of course, the longer it is, the more complicated it gets. So we tried some translations. This is one I wanted to share with you because this is one I actually made together with an Indian poet whose name is Vidit Panchal. He is a poet and a doctor at the same time, and he helped me. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So if you will bear with me, I will read this simultaneously in Hebrew and in Hindi. Like, I teach Hindi at home, so I'm used to doing Hebrew Hindi simultaneously. So now it will be just the other way around. The author is Avot Yeshurun. The title, Kol HaNaharot, इसका मतलब है सभी नदियाँ. Kol HaNaharot הולכים אל הים, והים אינו מלא. כל הנהרות, सभी नदियाँ הולכים אל הים, जाती है समुद्र में, והים איनो मले, और समुद्र पूरा नहीं भर जाता. כי כל הנהרות חוזרים אל הנהרות, क्योंकि सभी नदियाँ लौटती हैं नदियों में. तामीन ली, यकीनन, सचमुच. זה סוד है. זה סוד है. Sorry, this was a mixture of Hebrew and Hindi. Wow. זה סוד, גאות ושפל. एक रहस्य है ज्वार भता. זה סוד, תרת הגעגועים. एक रहस्य है अभिप्सवाद. This is a word we came up with. Vidit Panchal and I, we came up with this word because what it says in Hebrew, Tarat Hagaguim, Tarat Hagaguim, Amila Tarat. So, sorry, I'm starting to speak to you in Hebrew. The word Tarat, Torah. Did you hear this word, Torah? So that's the same word. It actually means a science of something. So literally, Tarat Hagaguim means the science of longing for something, for someone. Jwar bhata, something goes, something comes. Yeah. Huh. So abipsa is the longing, and we wanted to make a word that would be something like the science of. So we decided that the vad at the end would give that. It's neologism. It's a word that didn't exist before we thought about it. How do you like it? Is it understandable at all? I would really want to know. I can see that you don't. आपको नहीं अच्छा नहीं लगता है ये?
मेटाफर ठीक से बैठ नहीं. एक रहस्य है ज्वार भाटा. Again you are saying that एक रहस्य है अभिप्सावाद. तो ये इस वर्ड ये जो मेटाफर है, जो रूपक कविता में तो रूपक ही उसका अर्थ होता है. तो ये रूपक मुझको खुल नहीं रहा है. ज्वार भाटा तक तो ठीक है. सभी नदियां जाती हैं समुद्र में और समुद्र फिर भी भर नहीं पाता. यदि मुझे ये इसको भी स्ट्रक्चर करना होता, मैं हिब्रू तो जान नहीं रहा, पर इसको हिंदी के टर्म में यदि मुझे करना होता तो सभी नदियां जाती हैं समुद्र में, समुद्र फिर भी नहीं भर पाता, क्योंकि सभी नदियां लौटती हैं नदियों में यकीनन. एक रहस्य है ज्वार भाटा, एक रहस्य है ये खुल नहीं रहा है मुझसे. मैं इसकी गांठें नहीं खोल पा रहा हूँ.
This is the biggest challenge in this poem.
क्लियर नहीं हो पा रहा.
This last line, until the last line, it's very simple language in Hebrew, and the last line is just.
किसी को ये स्पष्ट हो रहा हो बताइए. थोड़ा सा जरूरी नहीं है कि मैं सब कुछ जानता हूँ. अब वैसे किसी को ये बात यदि खुल रही हो तो थोड़ी सी गांठ आप लोग ढीली कर दीजिए तो मैं जोर लगाऊं.
बोलिए ना, बोलिए. माइक दो, माइक.
अंग्रेजी में तरह गागुइम, अंग्रेजी में I would say the science or the theory of longing. Longing.
उत्कंठा फिर ज्वार भाटा के साथ भी तो देखना है.
उत्कंठा.
अब बोलिए ना, कुछ बोलिए. माइक दे दीजिए, सभी बोलिए.
मैम भी कहा था कि लॉन्गिंग के बारे में ज्वार भाटा और ये इच्छाओं के बारे में हमें जाना भी है और वापस भी आना है. कोई अभिश्वास की जगह यहाँ पे इच्छा है या हमारी कामना है, हम मिलना भी चाहते हैं पर नहीं भी मिलना चाहते. ये हम करते हैं.
तो हिब्रू में भी जो शब्द होते हैं वे कठिन होते हैं.
हाँ, ये इस तरह कायम नहीं है हिब्रू में.
नहीं होता है.
नहीं.
तो ये अच्छी बात है कि अनुवाद में भी एक जैसे कि सब कुछ बहुत सादा है. अंतिम ऐसा होता है.
This is actually very, very interesting. I'm not sure whether it's me, but the poems that we translate from Hindi, most of them are universal. They are poems everyone understands. And when we got these poems in Hebrew and tried to translate them,
जो हिब्रू में ये लास्ट स्टैंजा है,
Uh-huh.
इसको यदि आप क्रिटिक कर दें अंग्रेजी में या हिंदी में
तो यही है,
निकाला जा सकता है.
यही है. This sod, this is rahasya, the secret. This is a secret. ज्वार भत्ता. No, ज्वार भत्ता. बिल्कुल. अंग्रेजी में. Thank you. Yes, exactly. High tide and low tide. And then again, this is the secret, the science of longing. That's exactly what it says. Chaha.
But one thing that could add the meaning in the second, ek rahasya with an exclamation mark. That would add a certain emotion that's missing.
In the first one or in the second one? Okay. Ek rahasya.
Because it is being expressed there. So an exclamation mark would actually add the emotion that is sort of given in the next word, avipsavad or whatever word you may use.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting. We had a Zoom lessons session, something like that, a year ago, where we read this poem, and of course, as long as we don't start a discussion, no one says anything. So he just read it, Abhipsavad, and it was okay.
शायद आप ये कहना चाह रही हैं कि एक रहस्य है लहरों के श्रृंग और गर्द, मनुष्यों की इच्छाओं के श्रृंग और गर्द. इच्छाएं भी उठती हैं.
बात तो ये है कि मुझे अनुवाद करना है, ये मेरी कविता नहीं है ना.
वो तो बात तो आपने जहाँ ये कहा कि ज्वार भाटा क्या है, ऊपर में आपने यकीनन दिया. तो यकीनन हिंदी, ये जो यकीनन शब्द हिंदी के बजाय हिंदुस्तानी है. भारत में एक बड़ी समस्या है हिंदी को लेकर. तो अब ये यकीनन से ज्वार भाटा और अभिप्सावाद, इन तीनों का वो
रजिस्टर अलग होता है.
संगति नहीं बैठती.
That is a very interesting point. Okay, thank you.
और ये तत्सम संस्कृताई.
Thank you. This is a very interesting point. Let's look at another one.
What is the Hebrew translation in English from which you have done Meena?
In Hebrew, it's taminli. Literally, in Hebrew, taminli means believe me.
Believe me.
Believe me.
Believe me.
Yeah, exactly.
मगर ये दो शब्द जो है ना, ये संस्कृताइज होने की वजह से उसमें वो चावल में कंकर की तरह.
This is a very good point. Thank you. We didn't think of that. Let's look at another one. At least I will think about it now.
Avipsavad में to and fro movement is not there. Avipsavad is double ichha. That is not changing, not changing.
But that's a science. That's the point, because it's.
Avipsavad is not to and fro. Jwar bhata is to and fro. So that relation is sort of the chain is breaking.
No, but it's the same in Hebrew. Okay, but there is this alliteration in the word ga'abu. किस शब्द के लिए? ज्वार भत्ता. ये बिल्कुल ज्वार भत्ता है. ये ut v'shefel is a low tide and high tide. That's बिल्कुल ज्वार भत्ता. Sorry, again.
वो ज्वार भाटा के साथ ये उत्कंठा बैठ जा सकता है. ज्वार भाटा के पास तो वो जब ज्वार आएगा तो उसके पास तो दूसरा चारा नहीं, उसको गिरना ही. ये उत्कंठा में, इच्छा में ये है कि गया तो अब वह पता नहीं किसी कारण से पतन हो जाए तो हो जाए, इच्छा है तो चली गई.
Let's look at another poem, also very short, by Leah Goldenberg. This one I translated together with one of my students, Oritzin. Let me try. Tene male kochavim, tokri sitarom bhari. Reach, sorry. Reach dashim दुवविम सरसराती घास की खुशबू अमोक गहरे अमोक sorry okay let's just read in Hindi टोकरी सितारों भरी सरसराती घास की खुशबू
सरसराती शब्द घास के लिए उचित नहीं होगा, इसको आप झूमती कर सकते। घास सरसराती नहीं, घास झूमती।
ओके झूमती घास की खुशबू
सरसराती मतलब वो रेंगे जैसे
मैं समझती हूँ। ओके गहरे औस की गहराई में मेरा दिल धड़कता है। हजारों औस की बूंदे कंपाते हुए देखो तेरे कदम करीब आते हैं। गहरे औस की गहराई में मेरा दिल धड़कता है।
हिब्रू में कैसा होगा बस मुझे
ओके हिब्रू में कैसा होगा?
गहरे ओस की गहराई में तो कहीं फैले ओस की सघनता तो नहीं कर रही है, क्योंकि ओस में गहराई होती नहीं और
ये तो
फिर भी ये तो मैं कह रही हूँ मेरा काम है अनुवाद करना, ये मेरी कविता नहीं है।
ये प्रॉब्लम है, जो हम चाहते हैं वो कवि के दिमाग में नहीं होता।
But this is exactly
वो लिखता है, वो लिखती है ये लेहा गॉडमैन।
This is exactly my point.
हम क्या करेंगे?
This is why translating from Hebrew into Hindi is much more complicated for me. Because, I mean, Sarsarati Ghas sounds weird in Hindi, but it also sounds weird in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Dovavim. The Shim Dovavim. But we have the alliteration in Hebrew and in Hindi. Dovavim and Sarsarati, we have the Vav. So this is the reason we chose it for. But let me, because I only have 10 more minutes, I want to show you something else, something that wasn't done by me at all. This is a poem by Gili Khaimovich. That was first, actually, let's first look at the original. Gili Khaimovich is a poet. She lives in Israel and writes in English and Hebrew. And this one poem was written in English first and then translated into many, many languages. There is a book with translations of this poem into many languages. And it was also translated into Hindi by Dr. Ved Mitra Shukla from Delhi University. And we will read the Hindi translation afterwards. The problem with this poem is not only that it's a Hebrew or Israeli poem where the meaning is not very clear, it's not universal at all, but also that there is this cultural meaning of the Wailing Wall, which you have to understand the poem. So let me read it in English first. You're my wailing wall. You're my wall. You're my wailing wall. Not the one in Jerusalem, but here in our home, built on my heart. This is the happiness you're capable of bringing me, being a place to cry. This poem is a note I am hiding inside you, pleading to have more than you to be familiar with. This poem is a prayer that the note will be found and heard by someone other than yourself. Now, I don't know if you know what the Wailing Wall is. But the thing is that people actually do write notes and hide it inside the wall. So she's kind of comparing the person she writes this to with the wall. Okay, so let's look at the Hindi translation. Dr. Ved Mitra Shukla made this translation. Meri diwar ho tum, मेरी वेलिंग वॉल मात्र जेरूसलम में नहीं बल्कि यहाँ हमारे घर में मेरे हृदय पर निर्मित रोने के लिए एक स्थान होकर प्रसन्नता है जो तुम मुझ तक पहुंचाने में समर्थ हो। एक टीका है ये कविता, छिपा रही हूँ तुम्हारे भीतर, परिचित होकर अपने से अधिक धारण करने का निवेदन करते हुए। एक प्रार्थना है ये कविता कि तुम्हारे स्वयं के अतिरिक्त किसी अन्य के द्वारा टीका प्राप्त की जाएगी, सुनी जाएगी।
यहाँ टीका शब्द बिल्कुल उचित है।
It sounds more word to word translation. Tika sounds more word to word. Like wailing wall.
Wailing wall to Amra.
Aesthetics are lost in the translation.
But you like the English one?
Yeah, English one is better, but the Hindi is a disaster.
Well, of course, the original is always better. I hope so. Okay, no, you're right. Not always. That's true. That's true. You're right.
No, for poetry, it's really difficult.
For poetry, it's very difficult.
It's not that.
Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to share this with you and to hear your thoughts about it. So thank you very much.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Oh.
So we're going to switch somehow right now. I'm not sure how. You need this.
Okay, maybe if you have some, while I connect my computer, maybe you can ask more questions or give your thoughts about what we debated now.
Just a second. Here. Take this.
जो handouts मैंने भेजा है मेरे लिए ताज़ी Why don't you share your thoughts? ये चलता नहीं? अच्छा ठीक है. Did you find the thing? Yeah, you found it.
My question is that like there is concept of wailing wall, and it's not just a wall because for Jews it is a kind of an identity because they believe that after they were like once they cross the wall there is a temple of Suleiman. So I don't know how do we perceive this notion in Indian context because we don't have such concept of wailing wall where we go and put it. So how did the translator took it from Hebrew, even though his native language was not Hebrew? You can still perceive it.
लो No, that's fine. नहीं क्योंकि ये जो लोग ऑनलाइन होते हैं दोनों का प्रयोग करना
इसका okay, ठीक है. That's exactly my point with this poem, because as I said, this poem has been translated into many languages, and there is a book of translations of this poem, and you cannot translate Wailing Wall in any way.
Onomatopoeic sounds cannot be translated exactly as it is.
Yeah.
Because that makes it, difficult. Onomatopoeic sounds in one language
of course.
would absolutely be different in another language.
And maybe they will not even be there at all. That's true.
Because I tried once, it was not possible at that.
What did you try?
Because I remember this was a poem. I took it out because when you were doing the onomatopoeic metropic sound is basically whenever that Hebrew portion, I don't speak Hebrew, but that was a metropic sound for me when he was speaking. So I remembered I had tried an onomatopic sound poem because it was Harivansh Rai Bachchan's poem. The place where I was getting stuck was especially this portion. Bhuja bhuja pharak pharak rab mein pharak pharak. So the main portion I was getting stuck with, especially this onomatopic sound. Bhuja bhuja pharak pharak rab mein pharak pharak. So how would you translate it in French?
Yeah, that's the question I have. When you don't have this thing,
Exactly.
It was, honestly speaking, it is easy to translate French into English. Because I was doing a French to English translation. It is a poem by Jacques Prévert. So where even if I do a literal translation, market of flowers, market of birds, okay, still acceptable. But the moment I'm doing these sounds, it is just not funny. The aesthetic meaning will be lost. And I was like, it is not happening.
Right. So much more easy with prose.
No, not really. If you translate correct samadhi, you will not say that.
Alessandra Consolaro, who translated it samadhi into Italian.
You can have the same problems, even with some kind of prose. So I think the problem of recreating sounds in another language is really a big problem. I will give you some examples in one of the classes because, okay, I don't know. Today I don't want to talk about Rit Samadhi. I just want to talk about a poetic experiment that was done. And it was something that the poet requested to do. So this is a book that came out in 1999. It's called Poetry in Disguise, Poesia Travestita, which is like, like for carnival, you put on something, you put some disguise. And the poet is a very, very important Italian poet, Eugenio Montale. I don't know if you ever heard him, but he got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1975, and he's really one of the most important poets. He's very difficult to read, but and as you can see, he died before the experiment was finished, but the idea was started, when he was there. And it all started, it's about serial translation. And here you have a definition of serial translation, back translation, indirect translation. I don't know if you're familiar with these expressions, and I'm not going to give too much time to that. But a serial translation is like, you translate from A to B, from B to C, from C to D, and then you translate back to A. And this seems to be something weird, but it's the system that has been used for the Bible, that is used, for example, by the Sahitya Academy. You always pass through English when you have to go from one text to another in an Indian language to another. And it's what anthropologists do constantly. So, it seems to be like a weird experiment, but it is something that people do normally in translation. The back translation is like, when you have A, and then when it's translated in other languages, you go back to A. This is the back, you go back to the... And indirect is, of course, like, you go through English. So you don't translate Hebrew to Hindi, but you pass through the English translation. So I'm not going to give you a lot of explanations. Who is interested will find some more detailed things. But this is one of the reasons why in the European Christian tradition, the religion, there is this soul-body dualism that is very marked. And during the Middle Ages, it became really something very strong in European culture. This becomes important because it has its roots in the Greek translation of some Hebrew terms that had different meanings, and so they were used. The Greek translation used some words, and then when they came into Latin, they maintained the meaning that it was in Greek. So you can see that this can have very important results, for example, theologically. And for example, if you pray in Italy nowadays, I'm not a church goer, but when I went last time I went to Mass for some reasons, I was shocked because I did not know the right words, because in 2020, some of the words were changed in Italian, because this lead us not into temptation. In Italian, it's non indurci in tentazione. It's the verb indurre is like you push somebody towards something. And how can a good Christian God push you into temptation? This is something weird. And then, this has been like a discussion that went on for a long time. And it's because of the verb that was used in Latin to translate the Greek translation from the Aramaic text. So you see, this serial translation can have some things. And of course, another issue that you can also find it in what Marina told us is that, when we translate, we always have to take into account the extra-linguistic context. So it's not only a matter of words, but, what this word means in, like, the Wailing Wall, okay? So I'm not spending too much time. So what happened in this experiment was that Montale wanted one of his poems, which is a very famous one, Nuove Stanze, to be translated into Arabic by a very good translator that he knew personally, he was really something that he trusted. And then this Arabic poem had to be given to a translator to be translated into French. The French translation was to be given to another translation, but without knowing what is this poem. So you get an Arabic poem, it could be anything, but it's in Arabic, so you make up some ideas of what this is out. But then the French translation was given to the Polish translator without knowing anything. So the person who received the text didn't know anything about the provenance of this text. So the only one who knew who is the author and which is the original, was the first translator. And then in the end, as you can see, we're going to go from Polish to Russian, Russian to Czech, Czech to Bulgarian, Dutch, German, Spanish, Italian, back to Italian. So, and Montale, he was he was a funny man. He said, I am sure that the final thing will be something totally new and totally different. So I want to see, what comes out of that. But what I'm interested in is to see where the slippages appear and why, what are the processes of this serial translation, at least in this. So you have the text, and of course you can read the English translation. As you can see, the English language is not in the picture, because I'm sorry, but we don't care very much about English people. We are Southerners, and so we. I think very weird languages were chosen. German, Dutch. No English. I don't know why, but I think there is a why. Because English is. If you have something in English, then it's English. So I will read it out in Italian, even if you don't understand it, because I think poetry, as we said, it's sound. You have to listen to it. And I'm not reading all the different translations, but I will only point out what happened in the process. Nuove stanze. Poiché gli ultimi fili di tabacco al tuo gesto si spengono nel piatto di cristallo, al soffitto lenta sale la spirale del fumo che gli alfieri e i cavalli degli scacchi guardano stupefatti, e nuovi anelli la seguono più mobili di quelli delle tue dita. La Morgana che in cielo liberava torri e ponti è sparita al primo soffio. S'apre la finestra non vista e il fumo s'agita, là, in fondo, Altro stormo si muove, una tregenda d'uomini che non sa questo tuo incenso nella scacchiera di cui puoi tu sola comporre il senso. Il mio dubbio d'un tempo era se forse tu stessa ignori il giuoco che si svolge sul quadrato e ora è nembo alle tue porte. Follia di morte non si placa a poco prezzo, se poco è il lampo del tuo sguardo, ma domanda altri fuochi, oltre le fitte cortine che per te fomenta il dio del caso quando assiste. Oggi so ciò che vuoi. Batte il suo fioco tocco la martinella e impaura le sagome d'avorio in una luce spettrale di nevaio. Ma resiste e vince il premio della solitaria veglia chi può con te allo specchio ustorio che acceca le pedine opporre i tuoi occhi d'acciaio. So you can follow you can read the English translation. It's very similar to the Italian because it is a direct translation. And okay, what is this poem about? It is about a couple, a man and a woman, playing chess at home, in a dining room, in a sitting room, and they are playing chess. She's smoking, and she extinguishes the cigarette in the ashtray, which is made of crystal, so it's transparent, and the smoke, makes some circles, and it's like a ring. It's a ring of smoke, but she has rings on her fingers, so the rings that come up are, they are more mobile than the rings you have on your finger. And then this chess play gets another meaning because it's like a chess play between two people. But in Montale's poetry, the woman has always a salvific power. So when there is a problem, it's like in Dante. Dante was looking at Beatrice like the one who can save him from sin and so on. In Montale, there is this idea, but he has some doubts. And he refers to a previous poem where he thought, I don't know if you can really save us or not. So you who are, the savior, can you do it or not? And now I know that you can do it. And I know that the Second World War is about to begin. So in Italy, we have the fascist regime, and there are, all these ideas of war and, violence and, all these things, which is all around. So in this chess play is like, this war play that is going on. And I know that, the times are very bad, but the person who is behind you, not behind you, is beneath, it's with you, next to you, is with you. It's like, can resist this violence, this war, and so on. And now he uses this idea of the burning glass that is, I will show it to you. Okay, so this is the scenario. So there is this ideal city of joy and light and whatever, and there is, this chess play between two persons, but one of the person is the woman who is like the savior, and the other one is the scenario of war. So in the translation, this scenario is maintained, but the first part is erased. What remains in the different translations is only the war. And the fact that there is this ideal city of joy and whatever it disappears. And it disappears very, very early because there is also this shift to the notion of illusion. So what is, I will show it to you in a minute. It's interesting that the surface structure of the poem is preserved in all the translations. But for one thing, because in the first translation, one line is taken out or is added. I think it's added. And, oh, I have to look at the, sorry. So, I think if you see, now I'm unfortunately in the, okay. So, but anyway, what happens in French then remains in all the other translations. And this is interesting because this means that, okay, the chess game remains, the pressing words remain, but the connotation that were in the original, they disappear. And so you see the strophes are the same. The structure, the lines, they are really very similar. And it seems that all the translators, because they didn't have any extra linguistic reference, they would be very, very faithful to this formal aspect of the poem. And because, okay, of course, the rhythm changes because, you know, we have like the prosody of the original one is something that has, you know, a rhythm in Italian. It changes in Arabic. And then, you know, of course, everybody uses something like free meter. So it's not blank verse, you know, something like that. But so in the third passage that is from French to Polish, which we are not reading, but I can just point you out what happens, you know. There is, the first stanza adds another verse. Actually, make 7 verses and not 8, like in the original, because in Polish the translator condensates what is qu'observe avec stupeur. This is people who are observing with wonder. It's like condensed into a single word. And this makes everything shorter. And so all the other translations make the same thing. But yet, you know, the strophes remain the same. Okay. It's interesting also that there are the other thing that happens is the loss of technicalities and metaphors. Because in the Italian thing, we have the expression burning mirror that it is, I mean, a very technical term taken from war, you know, and and you can see it was used in the old ages to put on fire. You use the mirror to condense the sun rays and put on fire things, you know. But burning mirror in the different translations becomes a glowing mirror. But it's interesting because in the end, and also in the Beck translation, this glowing mirror becomes again a burning mirror without the technical meaning. And it's really a burning mirror, which becomes in the end an incandescent mirror. So it's really interesting because we start from a burning mirror, we arrive to a burning mirror, but it's a totally different burning mirror. And the other expression that is really interesting is the Fata Morgana, the Morgana. Morgana is something very specific, very technical. It's taken from meteorology, and it's a phenomenon that you can see on the sea. That you can see. This is a photo, a picture taken from Sicily. It's very, very common in Sicily when you look at Sicily is an island, and you look at the sea, and then there is no, il terraferma, okay, Italy, okay, it's like the continent, okay, I don't know how to call it, it's like, so, and in between you see these like towers or something like that, but it's okay, it's an illusion, but it's not any kind of illusion, it's a very specific kind of expression. In French, it is translated as mirage. And mirage doesn't have this technical meaning and loses also the idea of Fata Morgana, which is like a character of a literary character, because it was, like a person who was like I don't know.
Balthazar, Morgana, they are specifically related to magic and all.
Yeah. So it's something, you have, this gets completely lost, and then from French to Polish, you have to illusion, and then from there on, you only have illusion. So you see, it's just a very small slip, but it remains. Another very important one is the one that it's in this expression that regards war, because the poet is like, talking about this Morgana, this effect of illusion that you see that comes from the smoke, and then the smoke goes out, and so it's like an illusion that disappears, but outside altro stormo si muove, and stormo is the flock of birds. And this storm, what is this storm? Is una tregenda d'uomini. And tregenda d'uomini means a witch gathering. Tregenda is a witch gathering of men. So all this expression, which is very strong, it is full of images and so on, it gets concentrated in the idea of a crowd of men. Now you can see that a gathering of men is okay, but a witch gathering made of men, and they are preparing war, it's really a different image. And then it becomes a simple multitude. So you can see that these, metaphors are like, made weaker. And of course it remains them. And then we have the culturally specific terms. We have la martinella, and in the English version you find the martinella tolls its dull notes. And martinella is not, it's a very specific kind of bell that is in Florence, and it was used in Palazzo Vecchio during the Middle Ages to warn people, that the war was starting. Oh, here there is something like a misprint or something, or the war had already begun. And then in the translation, it becomes a fire bell, like, which keeps this idea of, warning, but it doesn't talk about war. And it's, of course, wasting, all the meaning of what was this bell for people who heard it. And then here we have some other examples that I'm not going to, go too deep into them. But it's interesting because there are some images, and this is how, when you were saying it's difficult to translate these images. Okay, because sometimes these expressions are not clear even in the original language. They are made up by the poet, and they request the reader to, like Gitanjali was always telling me when I was translating, and I was like, how can I translate this? What does it mean? And she said, be creative. So you have to be creative because the poet is creative, and maybe, I don't know, on purpose, put these strange things. And they create this, like, for example, le sagome d'avorio in una luce spettrale di nevaio. This is a beautiful image, but because you have ivory shapes, and okay, we are playing chess, so it makes sense. And then we have this ivory, which is white, is in a light that is white, but this white light is a snow-filled light. So it's the white that you have when it snows. If you want, I can show you a picture. It just snowed at home, so I can show it to you. And I mean, it's like you have this very white light, but it's ghostly. So, I mean, this is not a normal expression in Italian. It's something that, and then, of course, the French translator doesn't really know what to do with this. And she says, à la lumière de mon spectre, colline neigée, which is nice, but she is just putting words together, and it's not like a full-fledged expression. It's for sure it suggests something, but that's one of the meanings why we have the Dutch translation that is really like making up things, creating things, because a completely new meaning comes out. Because, you know, the Dutch translator, he probably was trying to make a sense out of that. And then when we go back to the final Italian, we have something totally new, because it's like in the spillage of light on my face, on my shining point, which is totally different from the first one. As you can see, we come to something very creative, totally new. And the last thing that I want to tell you regards something that is really important, and it's what happens in this poetry, but it's something that regards the relationship between different languages, which is gender slippage. Because in this poetry, we have a verse that says, tu sola. Tu sola is you alone, only you. But as you see in English, you don't know if it's only you female, only you male. Hindi में ये तुम ही ठीक है. But if we have like an adjective, we can have like, I don't know, acha, achi. So we can see that there is a gender, a feminine and masculine. But in English, no way. So, tu sola in Dutch becomes de enige, which is the only one. It's okay, it's correct. But the problem is that the next person doesn't know if this you only one, it's a you, Ganga ji, or you, Marina ji. कौन सी you होगा हमें मालूम नहीं. And then the German translator, he makes a choice. And the choice, he makes it because of the context he has. And look at this. Here is where, you know, stereotypes come in. Come on, we are talking about war. And we have a person that has eyes of steel. It's full of violence. Come on, this has to be masculine. While we know that the eyes of steel are the eyes of the woman, the savior woman that can destroy evil. But you know it if you know the context. If you don't know the context and you have this war and all these things, can you think of a woman doing it? Well, maybe I could do it, but most of the people, I don't know why, they think that these are things for boys, not for girls. And that's why in the German translation, we have the Einzige, the only one, that is masculine. And then the whole meaning of the poem becomes, that's why I told you, becomes only war and violence. It just, you know, erases everything that was there. But it's not the translator's fault. They didn't have the frame. So, I mean, but this is what can happen and what regularly happens. The power of our notions I mean, the notion that we have in our brain without knowing it, what we are, you know, we are like, you know, programmed to think in a certain way. And then I don't know if in Hindi, if you're talking about war and all these things, you would think more of a male or a female, but I would bet that, I mean, the warrior, it can be a woman, but it's something weird. I mean, generally, it is a man. So in the back translation, what do we get? We maintain the form, as I said, the scansion, the strophic scansion, even if there is a drop of a verse. We maintain the presence of chess. We maintain the presence of war. And as I told you, war becomes predominant to any other meaning. But we lose a lot of things. We lose, for example, the match between two lovers. It's nowhere to be seen. But this was the very starting point, and it is the relationship between this man and a woman that is really important. It just disappears.
Did it disappear in the...
Yeah, it just, it gets weaker and weaker, and then, it's just because this war image prevails in the end. And then, especially in the final translations, you only have this opponent, this war scenario where you have somebody that has to be destroyed by this steel of eyes and so eyes of steel and so on. And the savior woman figure is totally cancelled, even if this is the central part of the poem. It is the most important part of the poem, because if we know Montale's production, we know that this, and he is really making a reference to another poem of his that was called stanze, like stanzas. And this is new stanzas. So he's really making it like, we have a reference, but of course, if you don't know that it's Montale, how can you get this reference? You really don't know, you don't. So the final result is something very distant from the original one. Okay, this is not to say it's good or bad, but it is just to show you how these small slips, that you can have, they can have an important result. And so, we were talking about creating a new word. It's choices the translator has to make.
Just imagine how they would translate Abipsawad into English then.
Yeah, because, for example, vad is what generally is ism. Exactly. So they would probably make it like something ism. I don't know. But it's the science. Is it the science? Well, okay, we will try to solve it in the next minutes. So, okay, I would like to stop here, and I would like to have your reactions to this, which, of course, is something that has not Hindi into it, but it has a lot of, translation problems. And I think it is important if you just put it in together with the problems she pointed out, and maybe we can try to see what you think about that. And I don't know, we have some minutes. I think we have quarter of an hour, maybe 40 minutes. So
actually, I would like to know about, for example, in French, we have two concepts as a translator, succès and civilisme. For example, as you have shown that once for first time the translation of Italian, initially it was done to Arabic, and then at the end of the day it came as a two, and then again it came to Italian, and it was totally changed. So how do you think that the approach a translator use, for example, the succès, the civilism, does the translation also change with the approach? Or is it same?
Can you repeat it, please? Because I'm not sure that I got your point. So
I'm asking, there are two types of translators.
Okay.
First one is socié, who is from the same language, and another one is civilist. So as you said that in Italian, the poet wanted to see that what he has in his original, and then again it came back to Italian, and the version was totally changed.
I think, okay, all the translators were made by somebody who had the source language as as a second language for them, and the target language as their own language. Okay, so this is what happened, but I don't know if it's really something that matters, because, for example, she is translating. I mean, why should one translate it only into their own language? I mean, of course, I feel at ease when I translate into Italian. But I don't think that only Italians can translate into Italian, because, for example, she was born in Russia and from a German family, and and then she lived both in Russia and well, maybe not in Russia, in Soviet Union. So, and then in Germany, and then she moved to Israel, and she started using Hebrew, but she uses all these languages. And then I have a problem with this because, okay, we are in India. Let me be the anti-Indian, okay? You are always talking about multilingualism and everybody is multilingual in this country. So what do we do if one has to translate only in the Matrabhasha? What is the Matrabhasha in a multilingual setting?
There is no, because that is one problem which I have faced while teaching French.
Okay.
Now, the concept of translanguaging is happening, especially in linguistics. Now, what happens is when you're teaching a language to a group of students, let us say, one is, I was discussing it with my HOD the other day. One will be Tamilian. Now, one will be Bengali. Now, when you say Hindi, now that becomes very dubious. As her said, person belonging to Bihar, my friend is there, speaks different, in a different context. One belonging to Uttar Pradesh will speak in a different context. So it's a very simple thing I was teaching them. I was teaching them, I love you, which is je t'aime in French. So I said that, see, you learn the way it is said, I love you. So in Bengali it will be Ami tomake bhalobasi. In Hindi it will be मैं तुमसे प्यार करती हूँ और मैं तुमसे प्यार करता हूँ. Divided from the ten. वहाँ पर students raises a hand and says, कैसी बातें कर रहे हैं मैम, हम आपसे प्यार करते हैं.
Culture.
That is my point.
Yeah.
And at that point of time, I was taken aback. Because it is true. He's saying, I love you. मैं तुमसे, हम आपसे, it's absolute. Now that makes a cultural difference. Now that is one point we have to fix.
Yeah.
Even
So
while teaching.
that's why, I don't know if
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
That's why, even if I admit, it's much easier for me to translate into Italian. But, I mean, I can use other languages, and of course, if you have to translate it to another language, you have some problems, because maybe your, I don't know, word, the way you can play with words is different. You don't know all the slangs and so on and so forth. But then, I mean, this doesn't mean that you cannot translate into another language. That translating into the Matrabhasha is better. So I don't know if I got your point, but I think it's debatable. Okay. And also because, there is this idea that only India is, sorry, we will come back to this, this myth of monolingualism in Europe, that okay, South Asia is multilingual and blah, 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 and, Europe is monolingual. Okay, maybe it can be like that, but it has not always been like that. Before the nation state was created, there was a geographical situation that was very different, and I don't know if, because we are talking about Nobel Prizes. Okay, so Olga Tokarczuk, anybody knows Olga Tokarczuk? She is from Poland. She got the Nobel Prize a few years ago. It's not because I love Nobel Prizes, but you will see that, prizes are important, because, so she was listed for the Booker Prize together with Red Samadhi's translation, the English translation of the books of Jacob. I don't know what is the exact title, I don't remember. which is like 1,000 pages. So it's like Retsamadin, it's heavy. And I read it, and then I discovered a different Europe, a Europe where people were really multilingual, where Europe was something that had a different geography, and you go from Turkey to Poland, what is now Poland, but there was no Poland at that time. So the problem is that we are trying to think of these things with the lenses of nationalism, which is another, and maybe there are different points of view. So even I'm not claiming that Europe is as multilingual as South Asia, that it's the same thing, but I'm just saying that there are some myths that have been created and now they are truths, which constantly happen. So about languages also, you know.
When we translate cultural nuances, so do we need every time to find equivalence, or sometimes we need to keep it as it is? So when
you can talk about that because you have the word. Thank you.
I think just as Alessandra said yesterday, there are no equivalents. I mean, maybe if you translate between German and English, you are able, or between German and Swedish, or German and Netherlands, they're very close together. Maybe there you will be able to find some equivalents. Otherwise, like between Hebrew and Hindi, very often there's just no such thing as an equivalent. You have to. Who said that yesterday? That translating is a very attentive reading, like the most intimate reading. As a translator, you have to read a thing, a poem, for example, and I don't know, kind of start living in it, to feel what actually is happening in the original, and then try to repeat that maybe with completely different words. But that's exactly what happened in the translations that you showed. So equivalent is really not the word that we can use, I think.
my question is, if we don't find equivalence, it may become very difficult for those who doesn't know the real original language, right? If we translate a poem written in French, and we translate for those people, like for Indian people, so if we don't find equivalence, it may be very difficult for Indian people to understand the real meaning of that word, right? So should we avoid, or sometimes we should find the equivalence?
Well, what do you mean? Only one word which is equivalent? If you say there is nothing like that.
For example, in Hindi we have a word dhoti, sari, right? But in French I don't think
That's
dhoti and sari.
Maybe has written sari as sari. So it's sari as sari.
Right. So
okay, but do you need to translate sari? No.
Exactly.
Because if I read that the woman is wearing a sari, I can't understand. Well, you can decide, like, who was that? Wait. I don't remember if it was Amitav Ghosh, I'm sorry. Now I don't remember because I'm bad at remembering. But there was a very famous writer who wrote a big novel. Now, it will come to my mind, sorry. But then, you know, he didn't put any note, any explanation. He left a lot of, like, Indian expressions in the novel, and then he put a glossary in the internet. So if you really need to have an explanation, you can click it and go there, and you will have the explanation. But you know, in the era of internet, I am pretty sure that if I say something like, I don't know, cassata, and you don't know what cassata is, or you're missing a lot because it's a wonderful sweet from Sicily, but you can just try to Google it and you will see it. You will not smell it, you will not taste it.
You will find it any of the bakery over here. Trust me.
It's not the real one. I'm sorry. But I mean, there are some things that, of course, maybe you don't know because it's specific of some place. But then they become global. We are going to discuss the global and local, because for example, now everybody is crazy for pizza here in India. The first time I came to India, there was no pizza at all. I'm old enough to remember that, there was no pizza. And then pizza came. But can you believe that it came from America, not from Italy? And everybody thinks that it's an Italian dish, but I'm sure that if you come to Italy and you have an Italian pizza, you will say, oh, this is not pizza. It's not Domino's pizza. It's okay. I mean, I am open to any kind of variation. It's cultural variation. What I mean is that, it's like, okay, there are culturally specific terms, and if you cannot translate them, sometimes you might want to leave that so that the reader doesn't. For example, Naveen was like, I don't know, he was suggesting that the translation that she was giving is not easy to read, Okay, maybe it's not easy to read, but what if I don't want the reader to be taken by the rhythm of my poetry like a lullaby and just go, oh, it's so nice. I want the reader to be shocked. I want the reader to face this. It's something that comes from outside my culture. And I have to negotiate my knowledge of that. So, well, I mean, it's choices that we have to make. And of course, I mean, sometimes this is a wrong choice. I mean, there are times when if you like for example, my colleague, she says that the word dharam should not translate it as religion because it's not religion. अच्छा ठीक है, ये सही बात है, लेकिन फिर भी आजकल यहाँ सब लोग जब बोलते हैं और धर्म का शब्द लेते हैं, उनके मन में ये जो धर्म संस्कृत में था शायद नहीं होता है, वो रिलीजन होता है ना? So what is the problem if I translate it as religion in that context? I don't know, translating something regarding contemporary India. Of course, if I am translating a Jain text in, I don't know, Prakrit, and I have then I don't know, then maybe I should be more careful because actually, you always have to contextualize it. But this is the problem of untranslatables, Are there really words that cannot be translated? In a sense, yes. But in another sense, anything can be translated. Maybe you don't translate it with an equivalent word, but you can find, like, I don't know, a paraphrasis, like make it like a short explanation.
Just like the line that disappeared from the translation, what you said, which became just one word.
Yeah. So, and of course, there is no single solution that we, yesterday I was talking about, the problem of, can we give rules that, oh, you do this and this and that. It would be so nice if we had like a manual and we just go to that and we have all the solutions. You don't have to think. It's so easy. But translation is not like that. So every time you have to, like you said, get deeply into the text and understand and then, fight with it or love it, I don't know. And then find something. And say, je t'aime, I like. You have to say, je t'aime to what you are translating. But in Hindi films, you never have... मैं तुमसे प्यार करती हूँ. It's always I love you. Why? Because I love you is not प्यार करना.
No, the worst part was not this. Worst part was when I had to ask for the Tamil translation. My friend who was a Tamilian, so I told him that so my friend who was a Tamilian, so I called him and said, would you kindly give me the Tamil translation for I love you?
So he said, I love you. I said, ठीक है, wait. So after debating, he gives me the translation. नाड़ उन्ने कातिल से. So then I said, very nice. So you said I love you to your beloved in Tamil. His beloved is also Tamil. What are you saying? I said, I love you. I said, why? That sounds more romantic. English version sounds more romantic than, according to him, the mother tongue. Now, the next question comes to me, did I say I love you in my mother tongue? No, I did not. उसको नहीं आती है. He is not, our mother tongues are not same. So, by the way, that I love you was for my husband.
But I am sure that people say I love you in another way. They use different words. They probably use, like yesterday, it was you, Naveen who were talking about, saying it with your eyes, आपने कहा था कि धन्यवाद शब्दों से नहीं कहा जाता आंखों से. तो I love you शायद शब्दों से कहा जाता है, लेकिन जो पक्का love है वो आंखों से होता है. तो क्या होगा? तो ये भी ट्रांसलेशन होता है.
समस्या जो थी उसको मैं एक छोटी सी बात से समझाना थोड़ा सा आगे तो सारी इन्होंने कर थोड़ा सा उसको साफ कर रहा हूँ कि जब कोई अनुवाद करता है तो उसकी नजर में टेक्स्ट जो सोर्स टेक्स्ट है वो दाता है और जो टारगेट लैंग्वेज है वो ग्राही. तो जब आप एक दाता के घर से कुछ उठाकर एक ग्राही को दे रहे हैं तो आपको एज ट्रांसलेटर ये आप ही का दायित्व है कि जिस ग्राही को हम दे रहे हैं वो उस लायक है या नहीं. यदि वह इस बात को नहीं समझ रहा है तो फिर आप वही है कि लावण्यमयी एक शब्द है हिंदी में और भारतीय भाषाओं में, और मैं इसकी व्याख्या इस तरह से करता हूँ कि शरबत जब आप पीते हैं चीनी का तो एक समय आता है कि शरबत संतृप्त हो गया, कुछ ज्यादा भी चीनी डालेंगे तो थोड़ा ज्यादा मीठा. नमक एक ऐसी चीज है जो किसी भी चीज में जरूरत से ज्यादा भी आपको बेस्वाद बनाता है, जरूरत से कम भी बेस्वाद बनाता है. इसीलिए किसी सुंदर स्त्री के लिए काव्य में लावण्यमयी कहा गया है. अब इस लावण्यमयी शब्द का अंग्रेजी में ट्रांसलेट करेंगे, आपके लिए कोई कहे शीश ये बहुत लावण्यमयी स्त्री, ट्रांसलेशन उसका कोई कर देगा कि शीश वेरी सालवी. आप उसका फिर से अनुवाद कर लीजिए हिंदी में तो उलट कर क्या आता है.
In Farsi as well, they say बारनामा कष्ट, 3 उत्तर बारनामा कष्ट with salt.
आप जिस समाज को संबोधन दे रहे हैं उस समाज को भी ध्यान में, हर ट्रांसलेटर ध्यान में रखता है कि हम मेरा ट्रांसलेटेड टेक्स्ट जिस रीडरशिप में जा रहा है उस रीडरशिप की बौद्धिक क्षमता क्या है और वह मैं उनसे प्यार करती हूँ को कैसे समझे. तो इसलिए इन समस्याओं को मेरा ख्याल है गंगा जी के चाय का समय हो गया.
ठीक है,
1-2 मिनट और बात
करनी हो. थैंक यू.
So with respect to the form, I mean, you said that the form was maintained during the translation, even in the Hebrew ones and in the Italian poem. But even if the forms are maintained, the stress is different in the words. The word formation in different languages happen in different ways. So even if the form is maintained, the poem sounds different. It doesn't quite sound the same. The stress goes at different points.
Of course. Well, this is also because each and every language has different sounds, so...
So the challenge that's besides the translator here, is whether to maintain the words form or try to replicate the sound pattern.
Well, you should try to do both. That's why being a translation is really hard. A translator is really hard. Because you should always aim to the best. And then you realize that you're always losing something and you have to decide if you want to lose this or that, or both.
That's a question about the genre of poetry, whether it is a form that you need to see in a certain versified form, or whether you need to hear it in a certain sound pattern.
That's the thing with poetry translation. I mean, any translation, but poetry maybe more specifically, that if you read a poem in translation, you read an interpretation that went through this specific translator. I might translate it in this way. Alessandra would translate it completely different. That's just the point. But actually, what I kind of forgot to say before, and I think it's interesting, at least for me. The reason, right, we said it several times now, that Hindi is not my mother tongue, Hebrew is not my mother tongue. Why did I start doing that? Why am I not translating from Russian into German, two languages which I know much better? I was never moved by poetry in Russian or German. I cannot explain why. Hindi poetry was the first for me where I suddenly understood I like poetry. I could eat poetry every day. So, and then I had to give an expert opinion on a translation into Hebrew of Kabir and Mirabai. And I really knew very little of Hebrew back then, but I had to look at the translation and to say whether it kind of is good enough to be published. And I realized there are many similarities between Hindi and Hebrew in terms of length of words, and sometimes even because Arabic and Urdu and all that, sometimes you have even similar words like kadam. In Hebrew, you say lit kadem, which means aage bharna. So there are some of those. And somehow, I don't know, the length of sentences in the end, which you have, like, between different languages, if you have one sentence in Russian or German, it will be like this. In English, it will be like this. In Hindi and Hebrew, it will be like this. So they kind of match. Yes, exactly. So that was basically the reason for me. But I'm much more happy when I'm translating from Hindi into Hebrew. For now.
This idea of a traveling theory that Edward Said talked about,
how an idea traveling from one place to another, meaning slightly changes. That also applies in the idea of translation that you were talking about from Japanese to Arabic to French and so on and so forth. So there are these ideas that have been in circulation. We think of them as universal ideas, but if we sort of try to think of them in this term as traveling theory, idea at their origins may have been same, but traveling from one place to another, there is a nuanced difference that sort of translates into a bigger difference, let's say from country A to country B or region A to region B. So even as he was asking about cultural equivalence, if we think of them as equivalent, they may be kind of different. I'll take here an example of Farsi and Sanskrit. So both of these languages and the literature therein are thought of as originating from the same language family. But the Deva in Sanskrit becomes a Dana with Farsi. So the ideas are sort of similar, but they take very opposite meanings. So here in also lies a challenge to the translator. If we, let's say, we use Indra in our Sanskrit poetry, that would sort of mean kind of opposite for a Persian reader, because in their mythology, the same person becomes a demonic figure. That is a holy figure for Indians. That's also a challenge.
नवीन जी आपको कुछ करना है तो चाय चाय पीएंगे
चाय पियेंगे
ठीक है ओके
आगे से सारे सवाल श्रीमती को माइक करिए चाय वाले सारा सुन रहे हैं मैंने बहुत गंभीर बात
I think it has to be maybe
और सबसे ऊपर
There was no footnote for the phrase wailing wall. So I'm wondering if it was intentional. Like sometimes translators don't use footnotes to make to make the translation fluent. So I wonder what's your take on. So what's your take on should we use footnotes for the phrases like wailing wall and
yeah. Okay, I was just in discussion right now. I was reminded of something completely different. A translation of Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. Translation into German, which my mother was reading over 20 years ago. And I studied Indology. I went to India. So very many things that were mentioned in that book, I knew what they were. My mother didn't know those things. And there are a lot of footnotes at the end of that translation, just like another book. And she was not looking them up. And I asked her, sorry, how do you even understand this book? You don't know what that means. You don't know what this means. And she said, well, I take this different approach. I decide that whatever I'm able to understand is what I'm taking from this book. If I don't know that word, well, okay, but I know the other ones. So it totally depends, of course, on the person. But whenever you have footnotes, it really looks like an academic work and not as a literary translation. So quite often disturbing and not helping, I think. Thank you so much.
There are other translators who think that the footnotes should be used, and it really depends on what is your idea of the translation. I think it's whom are you translating for? If it's like I'm translating just to sell the book, don't put footnotes. Because people
are
think,
scared of
it's
that.
Boring.
Yes.
If I'm translating for my students, plenty of footnotes.
Sure.
Anything is explained, and they will love it. And if I'm translating for, I don't know, my sister, it's just like a rough translation. Oh, look, this is so fine, and blah blah blah. What do you think about that? It depends on who is my audience.
Yeah.
And nowadays, generally, publishers, commercial publishers don't love footnotes.
Absolutely.
Academicians love footnotes. I don't love them too much in translations. But, for example, you can, instead of making a footnote, you can write like an afterword or a preface. I think the paratext we are going to talk about. No, this is very important because this is where the translator can make her or himself visible if, you cannot do it through these sort of nuances. Also, the equivalence, you say, okay, I leave this. And then I explain why I did it in the afterword or something like that. Yeah. I think there are many, many solutions, so.
Also, there is this thing that you were talking about, the translator's job is to challenge the readers. Now, here comes
the idea of literariness as well, that the literary language is sort of an strange language for the reader. So if everything is explained in a footnote, the literary characteristic sort of goes away.
Yeah, you get less chance to interpret it yourself. So, चाय पियेंगे?
Oh yeah.
अभी चाय रास्ते में.
अच्छा. एक और सवाल तो मैं कुछ बता सकती हूँ क्योंकि हम ये जो मातृभाषा की बात जो हुई थी I translated into Italian the last poem by Kunbar Narayan, that is Kumarjiv. And I mean, Kumarjiv was not a Sanskrit wala, he was not a Chini wala, and he translated from Sanskrit into Chinese, and he is considered the best translator ever. And he is the name for a pool of translators who were like working together. And in Kumbar Narayan's version, he becomes really like a cosmopolitan man, you know, who can travel across borders. So I really loved that poem. And in translating it into Italian, the problem was that apparently the Hindi that Kumbar Narayan uses in this poem is very simple. It's apparently, it's like, you know, like really very, I don't know, even too simple, like prose, I don't know, something like that. But then when you go through it, you discover that simplicity is something that you create after a hard work. And so I think also in our translations, you know, you can decide that you want the final text to be easy, but being easy doesn't mean to be like superficial, or, you know, sometimes being simple, concise, you know, is even more difficult than writing a lot of, you know, blah, 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 blah. I always say that, you know, I can talk for hours. And it's funny, you know, I can do it, you know, it's like here, we are talking for 2 hours and blah, blah. If you say, you have to say it in 5 minutes. So that's really the challenge, you know. When somebody's interviewing you and you only have 5 minutes and you have to make your point. So, and you have to find the right word, and, you know, sometimes this is really the hard thing. And translation may also be like this, you know, finding the equivalence can also be something like you think for 3 nights and days, and then finally you say, oh, it's like this. And then, of course, somebody else will come and they will say, oh, I have a different solution. Fine. So, bas, हो गया. अभी चाय आ गई. ठीक है.
अरे मलखान सर आप नहीं मलखान सर को दूसरी जिम्मेदारी दी है. इस सत्र के धन्यवाद ज्ञापन के लिए मैं डॉक्टर मलखान सिंह जी को आमंत्रित करता हूँ. उधर ही से माइक. हेलो, नमस्कार. जरूरत है इसकी?
जरूरत है. आज के इस सत्र, यहीं से बोल देते हैं. आज के इस सत्र में सार्थक और सुबोध व्याख्यान के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आज के इस सत्र में आपने सटीक शब्दों के चयन पर, अनुवाद के प्रकार पर और उससे संबंधित चुनौतियों पर आपने प्रकाश डाला. आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. मुझे विश्वास है कि आप सब लाभान्वित हुए होंगे और अगले सत्र में हम डॉक्टर सोनू जी को सुनेंगे, तो उनका स्वागत भी है और आपका बहुत बहुत आभार और धन्यवाद. साथ ही इस सत्र को सुव्यवस्थित रूप देने के लिए प्रोफेसर नवीन और डॉक्टर गंगा सहाय जी का भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आपने ये सुंदर और सार्थक रचना आपकी परिकल्पना की देन है, तो इसके लिए आपका बहुत धन्यवाद, क्योंकि आपने केंद्र पे एक सुंदर कार्यक्रम दिया. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आप प्यारे बच्चों, आपका तो धन्यवाद है ही.
अच्छा.